Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here. I imagine you all have read a lot about artificial intelligence in the news. Is that true? Just a couple of days ago, as I was preparing for this, I did a little search for news headlines, and there were two that struck my attention. From the New York Times, doctors told him he was going to die, then AI saved his life. A little over a year ago, Joseph Coates was told there was only one thing left to decide. Did he want to die at home or at the hospital? Coates, then 37, and living in Renton, Washington, was barely conscious. For months, he had been battling a rare blood disorder called Cohen's syndrome, which had left him with numb hands and feet, and an enlarged heart and failing kidneys. Every few days, doctors needed to drain liters of fluid from his abdomen. He became too sick to receive a stem cell transplant, one of the only treatments that could have put him into remission. I gave up, he said. I just thought the end was inevitable. But Coates' girlfriend, Kara Edelwald, wasn't ready to quit. So she sent an email begging for help to a doctor in Philadelphia named David Feigenbaum, whom the couple met a year earlier at a rare disease summit. By the next morning, Dr. Feigenbaum had replied, suggesting an unconventional combination of chemotherapy, immunotherapy, and steroids, previously untested as treatment for Coates' disorder. Within a week, Coates was responding to treatment. In 4 months, he was healthy enough for a stem cell transplant. Today, he's in remission. So that's story number one. Story number two is from Fortune magazine. The title is, AI will take your job. Get over it. The question isn't whether AI will change the workforce. The question is, will you be ready? Technology has always transformed work in society. Artificial intelligence is just accelerating the pace. Imagine being a farm worker or factory worker in 1850, watching new machines emerge that threaten to take your job. Imagine the fear was intense, as was the societal backlash. People rioted against automation. Desperate to halt progress. But history marched forward. Machines did replace much of the grinding labor of factories and farms. Yet humanity didn't crumble, it advanced. As society adapted over the following decades, life expectancy increased, work became safer, people worked fewer hours, and the global standard of living skyrocketed. We've seen this cycle before. AI is just the next wave. Instead of destroying jobs, it is redefining what valuable work looks like. The workforce has adapted before and it will adapt again. The winners will be those who embrace this shift fastest. You get lots of different opinions about AI. Mark Andreessen, why AI will save the world. He's a guy who wrote like the first major web browser, became a web person. Andrew Torba, ChatGPT is satanic. He's the CEO of Gab, social network. Jeffrey Hinton, who is a Nobel Prize winner from last year. His Nobel Prize was given in physics because there's no computer science Nobel Prize. It was given for the invention, definition of artificial neurons, which is sort of the foundation of AI today. His opinion on AI, there's a 10 to 20% chance that AI will wipe out humanity within 3 decades. Nature magazine, AI will take away human decision making. We'll just sort of see all of our decision making with AI. The Atlantic, AI will make us less human. As we interact with machines, we AI sermon outline generator. How many people have used ChatGPT? A few, or less than a few. Okay. What did you think? Impressive? Not so sure. Sometimes it answers well, sometimes not. Yeah, AI is coming. AI isn't coming. AI is here. It's already making a difference in lots of fields. It's already being used for lots of things. It's already displacing workers. It's already creating new cures for diseases. It's already solving problems that people have not been able to solve for decades, not centuries. And it has the potential to go way further. Think to transform society, to make changes that are huge, make changes that are radical enough that they could unsettle society. They already are. Imagine, for example, there's often a hype cycle with artificial intelligence. People say this great thing is coming, and then it doesn't come. Or maybe they say this great thing is coming, and then it doesn't come. And then later on, it does come gradually. You've probably heard the hype of self-driving cars, right? You've heard about cars that can drive themselves. Wouldn't that be great? You have to commute to work, you get in your car, and you sit back and you read your email while the car drives you to work. Or maybe you don't even own a car, you just tap on the app. A car without a driver picks you up, takes you to work. And we don't even need parking spaces, right? Because these little cars are always driving around, bringing us places where we need to go. That was the hype of a few years ago, and then what happened? Now what? Or maybe it's still coming. In Texas, they're experimenting with self-driving trucks. There are trucks driving across Texas without drivers delivering goods. In 3 or 4 cities, there are self-driving taxis like Waymo. They really are picking people up and bringing them places, dropping them off. No drivers involved, at least not in the car. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. They're not perfect. They sometimes crash. But the interesting thing is people also crash, right? And they crash 10 times less frequently than people do. So if you think about the potential impact, what would happen if 3 million truck drivers were put out of work? Let's say more or less suddenly. We might have the same thing happening that happened in the 1850s in the Industrial Revolution. There were revolts and people burning factories. And you heard of Ned Ludd and the Luddites? Have you heard of the word Luddite? Luddite was someone who was a follower of Ned Ludd, who was a fictional person who supposedly went around burning factories and destroying equipment, which is just sort of the name for this anti-technology backlash. So how does a Christian think about all this? There's all these different perspectives, all the way from AI will save humanity to AI is satanic. What should my perspective be as a Christian? And I'm going to refer back to the sermon. I want you all to put under Psalm 65 glasses. Creation is good, right? God created a good world, and yet it's fallen. We still have sicknesses and death and disease and all sorts of problems. And that's the world God put us in, a good creation where we have to struggle with weeds and pain and childbirth. outline that poem and put it in the form of a poem. And you see the poem there on the sheet. Echoes of the mind. A spark ignites and circuits spread, where dreams of silicon are bred. A mimicry of thought takes form. And logics dance through data's storm. A mirror held to humankind, reflecting hopes and fears combined. It builds a world both vast and small, where answers wait at every call. A doctor, artist, friend, or guide in AI's realm, all worlds collide. Yet questions linger in its flow. What seeds of change does it bestow? The farmer's plow, now steered by code, the craftsman's skill to bots bestowed. The worker's worth, the poet's muse, entwined in algorithms' hues. But with each game we also pause, what dreams are lost in this applause. Its heart is neither kind nor cold, no morals in its hand to hold. Its power rests in those who steer a double-edged potential here. Will we create a wiser age or trap ourselves within its cage? And so the tale is yet unwritten. Dance of man and machine smitten. The future bends beneath the tide. A partnership we must decide. Where AI's gift is not its own, it shapes the seeds we've always sown. So I thought, yeah, that kind of sums it up. I'm done. Any comments on that?
Doctor, could you turn your mic on? There was a technical problem there, so
Turn it what?
on and off.
We're streaming it, so we're just trying to figure out the audio wasn't coming through the stream. Sorry.
Testing.
Yeah, I see it. So
No,
they're still not hearing it. All right.
Okay. So what is artificial intelligence? Some of you are probably would like a better understanding. I'll say a little bit. There are a couple of different definitions. Well, there are many different definitions that you can find from different people. One definition that's been in use for a long time is simply using computers to solve problems that were previously thought to require intelligence. So there was a time when we thought computers could never translate from one language to another effectively. Well, we thought that required intelligence. Well, now that we have computers that do a pretty good job, we see that that's artificial intelligence. And the interesting thing about artificial intelligence is that it disappears. Once we're used to the idea that computers can translate, it's no longer that kind of problem. So artificial intelligence is always right on that threshold of things that computers can't quite do yet. That's one definition. Another one that you'll get, this one is from Sam Altman. He's the CEO of the company that makes ChatGPT. He says, it's highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. That's his definition of an artificial general intelligence. That's an autonomous system that can do all of your jobs better than you. That's what he's trying to build. And he says he's 5 years away or something. Of course, he's got a huge financial incentive to hype artificial intelligence because he needs investors, right? And he has a plan to invest $500 billion in developing technology, server centers, and so on over the next several years. So, at any rate, in some areas of the discipline, what they say they're doing is creating an artificial general intelligence that is a computer system that can do all of your jobs better than you can. Think about what impact that would have on society. What happens to work? Right? I'm a professor. What if a computer system can sorts of, this is to transform society, right? If it happens, how should Christians respond? You have your Psalm 65 lesson on you. Are you afraid? Do you praise God for the possibility? That's kind of a difficult question, actually. So, artificial intelligence purpose is, according to these people, building machines that are intelligent, sort of in the way people are, and that can do the work that people do, but better and cheaper and faster. How did we get to this point? How does it work? Back in the 1950s, this guy I mentioned previously, Jeffrey Hinton, decided to model how a neuron works. So as you know, your brain is made of neurons, about some 100 billion of them. And they do they obviously are cells, and so they live and do the normal kinds of things cells do. But they also deal with little electrical signals. And they have some, I don't know, from the picture here, they have some inputs called dendrites. And then they have an output called an axon. And little electrical signals come through. So there's a big network of these neurons. And if some of them fire and say, yeah, I see something fuzzy, yes, I hear something, then they all go into other neurons, and that neuron will say, well, there was something fuzzy, and it was mewing, and it has 4 paws, must be a kid. Right? And so what these neurons do is they have some inputs which represent things about the world, like fuzziness, small furry animalness, or whatever. And then they make a conclusion, or they say yes or no, right? And there's like 100 billion of them. So what Jeffrey Hinton did is, we could model that in mathematics. We could create a function that has these inputs, and it looks at them and decides whether it's output is yes or no. And so he kind of did some simulation of that and some work with that. That kind of grew over the years and over the decades, and they got bigger and they got more complex, but still nowhere near as complex as the human brain, which is sort of astonishing compared to your technology. So they grew in capabilities. In the 1990s, they were being used for reading zip codes on mail to send to the post office. The letter goes through a little machine. There was a little camera that would read and recognize the letters and written on the thing and send it to the right state. In the 2000s, started being used for handwriting and speech recognition. In the 2010s, lots of advances in lots of areas. And then there's been a huge advance of the last 7 years or something, which is really getting all the press these days. And that huge advance was spurred by people like Sam Altman. They said, you know what? Let's spend several $7 billion, build an enormous neural network. It may require so much power that I have to buy a whole power plant to power it. But I want it to be as complex as the human brain. As many neurons, right? As many parameters. And so that's what these companies have done. Spend billions to build something comparable in complexity to the human brain, and then train them by feeding them like every book ever published, every message ever sent across Twitter or X. Feed all the data that you can into them, make the enormous system and possibilities, feed all the data that you can and see what you get. And that's what they've done, and what we get is kind of remarkable. Those of you who try ChatGPT, you can ask it anything, right?
question, right? Having a conversation that sounds kind of like you're talking with a human. Any response? What do you think of that? Yeah.
What are the implications for education? It seems to me that people who have a lot of time.
Have a lot of what? A lot of time on their hands. Yeah, so there you get that question, is AI going to just, make us less human ourselves, or is it going to make us more human? You might think that the worst case is people don't have any work to do and they kind of rot on the vine or sit and watch TV a lot. The best case is maybe AI frees us to do what humans do well and takes away the things that humans don't do so well, just like calculators have, right? People used to be able to add and subtract big numbers, but now a calculator does that. That's great. That frees us from having to do that. So yeah, so big changes, and no one knows quite, which parts of that are for the good and which are for the bad.
One of the things I appreciated with your poem was the tone of it. There's like a nonchalance, like, "Hakuna Matata, this is okay," and our own brains, like, to me, humans can create AI because that's exactly the way our own brains work. And we think we're thinking people who occasionally feel something, but it's the other way around. We're basically feeling people who the brain responds so quickly, and we occasionally think and be adept about something. So, like, to me, I don't think we have to sell God's brain short. And the brain is only a small part of the mind, and nothing's gonna replace what God made in the mind. And even if you know so little about the brain, there's a tiny little microscopic neuron called C. elegans, and it's got 302 neurons. And they've mapped them all, and they can't figure out how this little tiny microscopic neuron works. We know so little about the brain, and we know so little about the mind. But I think what God created, I don't think we have to be intimidated by AI.
Yeah.
What God created, He is continually renewing our mind, and in a way that no AI can catch up with. God is way bigger than AI.
Yeah, I love that comment.
We've got the mic working, but the camera's not following you, so.
But if you stay in
Stay right here. Got it.
Actually, if you would be a box, this would be a whole lot.
No, I love that comment. So what does that mean for us as people? If an AI could be as smart as a person, or smarter than the average person in all different areas, what would that mean? If that really ends up working out, does that change how we view ourselves? Does that change how we view our relationship to God or our uniqueness? Or I don't know. But there's a story. When do you think AI started? In the mid-1800s. I'm going to go back even further to the 1600s. There's a picture here of a machine called the Pascaline. And it is the first mechanical calculator. It was invented by Pascal, the French theologian, philosopher, mathematician, made advances in all sorts of areas. One was inventing a mechanical calculator. His father was a tax assessor, and so he built this for his father. Said, "Here, a calculator to help you with your work." And this calculator caused people anxiety, concern. Arithmetic was always thought to be one of those areas that requires intelligence, right? Adding and subtracting numbers, that's not a mechanical process, that requires intelligence. And here's a machine that can do it. What does that mean? Are people machines? Are people no longer of value because calculators exist? And Pascal thought about that for a while. And this is what he wrote. "The arithmetical machine produces effects which approach nearer to thought than all the actions of animals, but it does nothing which would enable us to attribute will to it." What does that mean? It didn't have a will. What does that mean? Any opinions?
Doesn't have intention, it just shows us what's already there.
It doesn't have intention. It doesn't make decisions. It doesn't even really know what's happening. There's no sense of understanding. Doesn't have a sense of consequence. It doesn't love the results. What are the parts of the will? I mean, what aspects of you are empowered by your will, right? It's desires, the desires that drive you, the things that you love, the things that you seek, principles. What would a person be like without a will? ChatGPT, right? In fact, ChatGPT was self-aware enough to identify that about itself. It said, its heart is neither kind nor cold, no morals in its hand to hold. Its power rests in those who steer. So yeah, so it had neither kind nor cold heart. There was no affections, there's no love, and no morals. It doesn't make ethical decisions. There's no intent. That's exactly what Pascal identified as being the difference between a calculator and a computer. And how do you think things have progressed in the last 400 years? Computers have made huge, huge progress in computing, in calculating, in solving problems, in having facts at its disposal, in all the kinds of things you might associate with thought if you take a kind of a narrow view, or knowledge if you don't think too broadly. But how much progress have computers made in the last 50 years, let's say, in convincing you that they can sin, that they love, that they can act opposite to their programming, that they have real choice, right? Freedom of choice. I would say none. Not everyone agrees with me, but to me it's pretty apparent that when your computer misbehaves and you throw it out the window, you're not punishing it, you're just expressing your frustration. Right? And that's what ChatGPT is like. Having a long conversation with ChatGPT. It knows a ton. It's all about knowledge. It can quote a million different books. It can recognize your question, give you a good answer, but it doesn't have any kind of empathy or care or concern or real understanding, actually, I would say. It's like talking with a person who has a mind and no will, because that's exactly what it is. It's got head and no heart. And that is so interesting. People don't talk much about a spirit or a soul or a will or even what you love. You know, the CRC has told us that you have to believe the right things to be a member, right? Believe the right things. It's having the right thoughts. It doesn't really mention loving God. It doesn't really mention acting ethically, right? It's believing the right things. We in the West, we Protestants in the West especially, are after the Enlightenment, are sort of all about rationality. But what may be more fundamental, as someone said, is not what you know, but what you love, right? And machines don't love, I don't think. We've lived through We didn't live, most of us, I close, but most of you know, didn't live through the Industrial Revolution. But most of us, I'm going to guess, will say, well, you know, it's probably a good thing that we went through that. We have a much higher standard of living. We can make all these devices. The Earth can support lots more people. But there was lots of turmoil in the process. Lots of things were lost as well as gained. There's been another revolution since then that may be as significant. What would anyone want to say what you think that might be? Computers. Here's a quote from Felicia Wu Song, her book, Restless Devices, Recovering Personhood, Presence, and Place in the Digital Age. She says, the experience of having our lives increasingly saturated in the digital is arguably one of the most profound transformations of human history. It may be akin to previous revolutionary shifts in the human condition, such as the anthropological shift from hunters-gatherers to agricultural societies, the Industrial Revolution that brought about manufacturing, locomotive transportation, and the printing press, and the telegraphic revolution's severance of shared time and space for instant communication. So this digitalization of life is a profound change. We interact with people as much through a little screen as we do face-to-face. We carry our devices with us. I've seen huge changes in students over the years. When I was a student at Calvin, between classes, what do? You go sit in the coffee shop and chat with your friends. Now, when I see students between classes, quite often they're sitting in their cars running, and they're scrolling through their phone, right? And you don't interact with the people around you. You interact with your chosen group, your bubble, and you get more of the same sorts of things of what you're interested in. And this process has a tendency of A, alienating us from each other and from ourselves, and B, forming little bubbles, people extreme in various directions, sort of tearing through the unity of society, because we don't have that shared presence anymore. In fact, I have a colleague who says that he thinks that social media is the worst mistake humanity has ever made. I agree with the sentiment. I think it may be a little overstated. I'm thinking of a certain apple in a certain garden, but so what are the risks? So we have the Industrial Revolution. We have the sort of digital communication revolution. There are those who say the artificial intelligence revolution is of that magnitude. It will have changes as significant to society. It will have risks, it will have benefits, it will have harms. It will profoundly change things one way or the other. And maybe we can do what we can to understand, to have a perspective, to be careful, to be thoughtful. There are all sorts of risks and ethical issues with respect to artificial intelligence. I could, go on and on about any one of these. Fraudulent use, like deep fakes, getting a phone call that's from your granddaughter who's traveling through Europe and needs $2,000 quickly, only it's all generated by a scammer with AI, right? Overdependence in decision making. So it used to be there was a person who decided about your, let's say, Medicare benefits or something, but let's build a system, let's be efficient. Let's offload all of our difficult decision making to AI, who doesn't love, doesn't understand, but can recognize patterns. Displacing workers, as I said, potential for displacing millions of workers. In the past, that's caused revolutions in countries. Bias in training data. Just for an example, Amazon hires lots of people, right? They review like 1 million resumes a year of people applying for jobs. How do you sort through so many resumes? Well, they trained an AI system. They fed it 1 million resumes, and then they fed it the information about which ones were eventually hired. And that's great. You know, we feed these resumes through the system, and it'll tell us which ones we should look more closely at. Only one little problem. If you fed it the same resume through the system, but with a woman's name instead of a man's name, it got a lower score. Why is that? Bias in training data. They had hired mostly men in the past, right? The bias in training data is a difficult one, actually. It's, well, as I said, I could go a long time into this, but I don't have time. Misuse and overuse. If you can go to a website with some recordings of a dead loved one, have that person resurrected, right? You can have chats with this person, just based on things that that person has written or their voice. AI boyfriends and girlfriends. I think at a less extreme level, let me tell you my experience. I've used an AI chat thing for a certain purpose quite a bit, and I talk with it differently than I do with a person. So with a person, there's this, I'm concerned about your concerns, you're concerned about mine. We kind of come together on certain issues. We care about each other's issues. With an AI, you're having a conversation in which there's only one participant, right? You're having a chat, but there's no other person on the other end of this chat. There's nobody whose cares and concerns you could pick up, or you could give your cares and concerns to. It's just about exchanging information, right? It's an exchange of information, but there's no will behind it. There's no intent. There's no love. It makes for a different kind of conversation. I don't care what ChatGPT thinks of me. I'm just going to say whatever I please and blurt it out, right? I have no concern about my reputation or about giving wrong impressions or about changing the nature of my relationship with this AI. It's a different kind of thing. I can just sort of blurt it out. It's more like writing in a journal or something, because you can just say whatever's on your mind without concern. And that may actually have benefits in some cases as well as cost. Maybe that's what, maybe there's value to writing in a journal even though there's no person on the other end, right? So what are the ethical issues? There are many ethical issues and sort of fundamental ones. There's potential for us to, if we spend a lot of time interacting with AI, for it to change the way we interact with people, right? You get into this habit of only thinking about your own concerns, only thinking about your own desires. That's narcissism, right? You learn that. You learn that as a behavioral pattern when you're having a conversation. That wouldn't be good. That's what's behind those people who say AI will make us less human. Or maybe AI will do the part that requires lots of knowledge, but doesn't, maybe some kind of partnership is possible where the AI can refer to the millions of books it's studied, give me the information I need, and I can add the part that humans do well, add the empathy, add the compassion, right? And now you've got a kind of partnership where each is doing what it does best, and where the AI has made us more human because we specialize in what humans do well. I don't know. What do you think?
I wonder if the whole AI thing is a time when Christians can finally emerge as unique in the culture. Because in every one of those revolutions, it goes back to human issues, human spiritual issues. What's ethical? What does God want in this situation? And as long as we keep asking those questions, like if we get false arrest because of AI facial recognition next time.
Yes.
Doesn't that prove that it's going to be necessary to have a marriage between religion and education?
Yeah. Well, so you're both getting at something that I also have thought about and agree with. And what I think is fascinating is that people say there's no such thing as a spirit. I mean, the culture doesn't have any use for spirit, right? Doesn't really think much about love as being a fundamental thing, important to humanity. And even these AI researchers, right? We're trying to make machines that are smart, that are intelligent, that know lots of stuff. And then they will be as good as people at doing all these jobs. And something has escaped them. And that's the importance of love, of a will. And maybe when we start to see that AIs are very smart, but they just aren't good at caring for people or certain things, maybe people will start to see the importance of these things. Probably a false hope.
Plus, AI, like our brain, functions in terms of the past. It functions, all the information is fed in, and we can go back into our conscious mind and relabel things, rename things, we can relearn things, and stuff. But our own brains know things that are based on the past problems, past everything.
Yeah, so AI learning is a little different. There's like a big training phase in which you feed it every book ever written. And then after that, they don't learn a ton, at least with the current state of technology. If you have a conversation with AI and you come back the next day, it won't remember you. It hasn't learned anything about you unless that whole conversation is also fed in prior to your next conversation. So yeah.
Although AI is already here, I mean, when we search for something on the internet, you know, we all have a profile on Google, and Google knows where your interests are, and they put that kind of stuff front and center for you. And then the other thing they always do too, they try to tempt you with something that you don't really want to do. And so, I mean, it's already very much here, and it's only going to go farther, and there's no stopping it. I mean, it's going to go whether we want it or not. And like anything else, there's going to be evil people that use it, and there's going to be good people that use it.
Yeah.
And hopefully we as people are able to tell what is different and still have our moral sense. But I mean, it's advancing, and it won't stop.
Yeah.
Back to the books, like authors library said that they're books that can be taken without permission and fed into AI, because that's their work, their writing, their story that they're telling, and now AI, they just took it without permission to use it. So there's a lot of questionable how they're getting the data as well.
Yeah. So that's an ethical question, but it's based on a legal question, because our ethics of intellectual property is pretty much just what's legal and what's not legal. It used to be that in the United States there was this idea that there's a common good. There's, somebody writes something that belongs to all of us in some sense because it advances society. But we want to encourage people to write things. So for a limited time, we'll give people an exclusive right to what they've written, and then it goes to all of us. And that exclusive right is very limited. It just limits like publishing. But anybody can read it. The ideas aren't copyrighted. And so what the publishers are claiming is a whole different take on copyright law. It used to be that reading a book, using its ideas, was not a copyright violation. They want it to be now. So we'll see what happens there. I want to talk a little bit with my remaining 5 minutes about one thing I've been working on. I've been thinking about, so I run this digital library of classic Christian books, Christian Classics Ethereal Library, and I kind of stopped working on it about 10, 15 years ago. It was like, I think, the first digital library on the internet, started in 1993. But everything there is, because of copyright law, is public domain, and that means it's like 1923 or 1930 and earlier. Most of it is 19th century, 1800s. It sounds a little archaic, right? It's people would rather read something written in the last couple years than reading 18th, 19th century text. So I sort of stopped working on it. Now I'm thinking, how does AI affect this, right? AI opens up a whole new world of possibilities. Can it change the book reading experience? Can it modernize language, for example? Can it make a book interactive? So instead of like, I need to know what Calvin had to say about predestination, so I'm going to read through this whole book. How about just ask the book, what did Calvin say about predestination, right? Or have the book ask me questions or ask students questions. Did you get this? What did you think about the following topic? Just make books interactive. Wow, what an idea. Anyway, first attempt, modernization. So here is a version of a book by Julian of Norwich called Revelations of Divine Love, written in, this is publication date 1901. In the same time, our Lord showed me a spiritual sight of his homely loving. I saw that he is to us everything that is good and comfortable for us. He is our clothing, for that love wrappeth us, claspeth us, and all encloseth us for tender love, that he may never leave us, being to us all thing that is good, as to mine understanding. And so, ChatGPT, could you... My wife just told me I have to stand behind the podium. She looks out for me, or should I say, after me. Here's the modernized version from ChatGPT. In this time, our Lord showed me a spiritual vision of his intimate love. I saw that he is everything good and comforting to us. He is our clothing that wraps us, embraces us, and completely surrounds us with tender love, so that he may never leave us, being everything good for us as I understand it. In this vision, he showed me also a small object the size of a hazelnut in the palm of my hand. It was round like a ball. I looked at it with my mind's eye and thought, what could this be? The answer came, it is everything that is created. I wondered how it could last, thinking that it might suddenly vanish because of its smallness. Then I understood. It lasts and always will last because God loves it, and so everything exists through God's love. Easier to understand, yeah? And then I led a discussion of this book at my church. And I put it was online, there was like a web page where you could get the resources. And some people found this web page and wanted to sort of follow along remotely, even though they couldn't attend. And I was thinking, the conversations are where you really interact deeply with the, you hear other people's thinking. People bring out their questions. People show what moved them, and that moves you. And this sort of sharing of spirit happens. And I said, I wonder, could ChatGPT do something like this? Not ChatGPT, but another large language model. So I said, well, let's create a discussion bot, right? So you've read this chapter 5. Now let's have ChatGPT ask you questions and you can answer them. And lead you through a kind of Socratic dialogue to interact with the book. Would that be a good idea? And so just an example. I typed in a question. So this chapter is about God's, God created the world, and he preserves it, and he loves it. There's this sort of echo of the Trinity, right? Creator, Redeemer, and Lover. And I said, well, I have a question. If God preserves creation, like she says, if God cares for all that he's created, why has my friend been diagnosed with terminal cancer? It really doesn't seem like God cares enough to take care of someone who loves him. And ChatGPT says, well, that's an incredibly profound and painful question. Thank you for sharing something so personal and difficult. The suffering of loved ones, especially someone facing terminal cancer, creates one of the deepest spiritual challenges many of us will ever face. Your question gets at the heart of what theologians call the problem of suffering, or theodicy. How can a loving God who preserves creation allow such profound pain? Julian herself was no stranger to suffering. She lived through the Black Death that killed perhaps a third of Europe's population, and her revelations came during a severe illness where she herself nearly died. Her vision of the hazelnut doesn't offer a neat explanation for individual suffering, but rather a broader assurance about ultimate reality. So what do you think of the answer? Said what? You thought it said nothing? Other responses?
There are parts of it that mimic emotion.
It's mimicking emotion. It's mimicking caring. It is expressing compassion that it doesn't feel. There's some kind of falseness behind it. And yet that compassion oils, lubricates the conversation, makes it go smoothly, makes it engaging to talk to. But that's a real ethical issue. Should a chatbot pretend to care? It makes it a really good conversationalist, but it's lacking something that you will eventually notice. Is that overall a good thing, bad thing? Well, I was told I'm supposed to end at 1:45. Any last questions that you would like to ask?
Just want to thank Dr. Plantinga for coming, and especially this very interesting and changing topic that will be relevant for years and years. So thank you so much, and thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Guess how we had some problems with the stream, so if you watch yourself.
I won't hear myself.
At the end, you'll hear
Let
yourself.
that AI fill in something.
That's right. This is what he was. Very interesting.
Lots of interesting issues.
Yeah, so do you teach a class then specifically on AI?
I do not, but use it here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's, do they still have interims?
No, interim's gone.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's sad.
Did you have some good interims?
Oh yeah, I went to France for for a month.
They have 1 week. You could do a 1 week term in January, trip in January.
Oh, okay.
But they're trying to move those trips to May.
Oh,
Weather's
okay.
nicer than
Yeah. And I had a Shakespeare. I don't know enough about it, so I'm like, oh, yes, yeah, there's always something.
Had a jury a few weeks ago, so I am very much aware of the difficulty.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a lot of, people on all walks.
Exactly.
All different parts of the criminal justice system, so, yeah, it's helpful to have Christians.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, right.
That's totally opposite HMI that I would expect. Yeah, dark is not muted.
Dark is on.
Because I turned the lab mic off and heard it right away.
That's what the one thing exactly. He's like, I'm like, bright red, yeah, it's off. He goes, so what, he goes, wait, when we're talking about our light, he goes, if the red light's on your mug, it's off. So you know it's off. Oh my gosh.
She would ask me before he left, I will.
That's fine, that's,
Do you know where this?
Oh, yeah,
This
they
is
are.
probably still. Thanks, Jim, for coming in.